Welcome, everybody, to the Global Awakening Summit. I am so excited for today's call, and I'm sure that the hundreds of people who are already on the line are as well. We have two superstars. We're all superstars, but we have two leaders in superstardom who are here as I've interviewed each of them separately, but here they are together, an amazing dynamic duo. Rob Williams and Bruce Lipton have worked together for 14 years, each in their own fields, and then together combining their talents and their wisdom to really be a catalyst, a platform for deep and lasting and phenomenal change. So I'm going to be introducing them officially in just a moment. And let's just take, just because of the delay, we were just a few minutes late starting, but we're going to make up for it in energy and wisdom and everything. So just take about 30 seconds just to get comfortable in your body. Take a few deep breaths and just allow yourself to get very present and open. If you're multitasking, I'm really going to invite you not to do that on this call because this will be a one-of-a-kind call. And give yourself the gift of being in the energy of it and in the conversation of it and the wisdom of it. I'm letting you guys know also that that Bruce and Rob are going to be willing to take some number of questions. We can entertain those on the webcast, and also you might have a chance to ask some questions live, depending on the timing and how many people raise their hands. But if you would like to raise your hand, you can do it by pressing *2. And without further ado, I am honored and delighted and super excited to introduce to you these two amazing leaders. Bruce H. Lipton, PhD, is an internationally recognized leader in bridging science and spirit. He's a stem cell biologist, a best-selling author of The Biology of Belief and other books as well, and recipient of the 2009 Goy Peace Award. He's been a guest speaker on hundreds of TV and radio shows, as well as keynote presenter for national and international conferences. Dr. Lipton has taken his award-winning medical school lectures to the public, and he's currently a sought-after keynote speaker and workshop presenter. He lectures to conventional and complementary medical professionals and lay audiences about leading-edge science and how it dovetails with mind-body medicine and spiritual principles. He's been heartened by anecdotal reports from hundreds of former audience members who have improved their spiritual, physical, and mental well-being by applying the principles he discusses in his lectures. He is regarded as one of the leading voices of the new biology, is the author of two best-selling works, The Biology of Belief, which I just mentioned, and Spontaneous Evolution, Our Positive Future, and a Way to Get There from Here. Probably the most important conversation we could have. And Rob M. Williams, the second half of this amazing dynamic duo, has a Bachelor of Arts degree in philosophy from the University of California at LA, a master's degree in counseling and personnel services from the University of Colorado. He is the director of the Psy-K Center International. For the first 14 years of his career, Rob was a direct participant in the U.S. corporate world. He held management positions in the backpacking, energy management, and telecommunications industries. And after experiencing a spiritual awakening during this corporate service time, perhaps I should say corporate slavery, he moved out of the business environment into a life of service as a professional psychotherapist. And finding the accepted counseling philosophy of the day lacking in spiritual essence and effectiveness, he studied many non-standard modalities for change, ancient and contemporary, out of which came a series of intuitive insights, life-changing intuitive insights that became the body of work called Psy-K. Psy-K is a simple and direct way to change self-limiting beliefs, not at the conscious level, but at the subconscious level of the mind, where nearly all human behavior originates, whether it's constructive or destructive. The overall goal of Psy-K is to accelerate individual and global spiritual evolution by aligning subconscious beliefs with conscious wisdom from the world's great spiritual and intellectual traditions. The practical application of this wisdom in our personal and professional lives brings a greater sense of purpose and satisfaction, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Psy-K is taught worldwide by certified instructors. So that's the brief bio, and the rest is world-changing wisdom, awareness, innovative thinking, new ideas brought into our collective consciousness. Both of these amazing men, researchers, innovators, have worked together and have worked separately as individuals to bring all of us and the possibilities for our future to a whole new lane. So, Bruce, Rob, welcome both of you, and thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedules to be with us today.
I so appreciate this opportunity, and I just want to apologize. Being a mountain man in California, I got lost up here in the clouds, and I want to apologize to the whole audience for the slight delay, but I'll speak extra fast to compensate.
That's good. That works for me. Double speed should be about right. Okay, so Rob, if you want to say hello.
Yeah, sure. I'm just laughing. I'm sorry, but I've worked with Bruce long enough to know that extra fast is his normal. So I don't know how he can go any faster, and for anybody to actually understand and process at that warp speed. So yeah, it's just a pleasure to be here, and Bruce and I so enjoy getting a chance to work together and to do interviews together. So I'm really looking forward to our time with your audience and with you and with Bruce.
All right. So I guess I'd like to just start by asking you, and I don't want to cramp your style in any way, so I'm going to ask a couple of questions and then, take it away. But I'd like to know, first of all, your perspective on the whole process that we call awakening, or at least that I call awakening, and what you've seen changing, because you're both in a position to watch large groups of people and processes. What you've seen changing over the last few years, and most particularly over the last, let's say, year, 6 months, what is happening, what is current in this process? Let's start with that, and then we'll take it to the next question.
Okay, can I start, Rob? Would that be good?
Sure, go ahead.
All right. Well, of course, I'm always an excited guy about the changes that are occurring because I started lecturing on the new biology in 1985. Excuse me. And at that time, I had trouble trying to get people to come into the room and listen to new concepts of consciousness and how our thoughts influence our biology. And it's interesting because now people show up by hundreds or thousands to hear the lecture. And what that really reveals to me is over the time there's a radical shift where people are beginning to realize that they really possess more power than they've been programmed to believe. And what's most important for me to emphasize is that when I was originally doing my research on the new biology, I was teaching medical students the concept of genetic determinism, the belief that genes control our characteristic and our fate, which is an unfortunate belief system because what it really represents is that look, as far as we know, we didn't pick the genes we came with, and if we don't like the characteristics that we have, we just can't go and change our genes. So what I was teaching to medical students at the time was victimization, that we're victims of our heredity, that genes are running in our family, and if we inherit these genes, then our fate is in some sense predetermined by these genes. And that victimization process is so disempowering because it says there's nothing you can do. And that you really have to turn your health over to other people. And it's interesting because my research really introduced the concept of epigenetics, which is the basis of how the environment, and more specifically our perception of the environment, actually controls our genetic activity. So the significance of epigenetics is rather than victimization, it really reveals that we have mastery over our genes. By changing our perceptions, by changing our environment, we can change our genetic programming, and therefore we really are very powerful people. Now, it's interesting because I saw this research 40-some years ago, and in 1990, science actually acknowledged the new science of epigenetics. And since that time, it's been slowly coming to the public, but the public is so ready for it, and that's what's so exciting is to see people are really moving into an area where they recognize they have power. And this is really the most important insights that the science is offering. It's a switch from victim to master. And I get so excited by it because after all those years of programming this victimization of heredity, people are now taking back power over their lives. And the illnesses and diseases that we thought were totally genetic are so malleable or changeable. by the way we see our lives. So the concept, for example, of cardiovascular disease turns out to be 90% lifestyle and environment. It turns out that cancer is only 10% related to heredity and 90% related to lifestyle and perception. That diabetes type 2 is 100% related to lifestyle. All of these things are very exciting. And so what we're finding is a transition of saying, listen, you're a victim of all these things and take these drugs and we'll try and help you with it. We're moving into an area now where it says, by understanding who you are and how you've been programmed, you can rewrite your genetic heredity foundation and create a different way of life. You are powerful enough. We don't have to be victims of cancer and heart disease and diabetes. We are powerful enough to rewrite the genetics of those illnesses and turn us back into health. And as I'll turn it over to Rob right now for his, is basically what I started to realize in all this is the influence of the mind is really the powerful controlling factor of our genetic expression. And then when I started to get into that, that's what led me to see, oh my goodness, there's two interdependent aspects of the mind, the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. And the difference between them and how they function and how they learn is so profound. And we have, in our history, grouped them as one mind, thinking that, for example, if I become consciously aware of something, then my subconscious should be aware of it too. It turns out this is not true. And then it turns out that only 5% of our life comes from our creative conscious mind, which has the power to change our genetic history. And 95% of our life is actually programmed by the subconscious mind, which is in itself programmed during our developmental years. And consequently, we have to understand the difference between these two minds and recognize that we can rewrite those subconscious programs that have been invisible to us, and in so doing, take back power over our lives. And that's when I met Rob Williams, which was so exciting because for years I was telling people about, oh my goodness, here's this new science about how our environment, our perceptions influence our genetics and our lives. And then I'd end my lecture saying, yeah, well, that's the great new science. And the first question that always came up after my lecture was, okay, how do I change those programs? And I felt so deflated because, of course, I was a biology guy, and I was so excited by the mechanism, which was like, wow. And then I'd end the lecture, and the first thing would just knock the wind out of me is because I'd have to respond, I don't know how to do that programming. And that's when I met Rob at one of the lectures because he followed me up after my lecture, and I was going back to my seat, deflated as usual with the usual question. And as I was putting my computer back into my bag, I hear over the speaker, Rob, who was the next speaker, and he said, "Oh, I'm going to show you how to change those beliefs that Bruce was talking about." And that captivated my attention immediately. I sat down and watched, and I saw a miracle happen in front of me. I saw Rob take a person who had a limiting belief about public speaking, so limited, in fact, that when Rob asked her, well, what would you like to change in your life, she, in the middle of this audience, was so unable to even say her name. She just glowed red, and Rob had to go out in the audience and talk with her privately to find out she couldn't speak in public. 10 minutes later, the big joke was Rob showed this new process called Psyche, and 10 minutes later, after she went through one of these Psyche balances, the joke will always stick with me the rest of my life is that he asked this woman, well, you'd like to explain to the audience about this process you just went through. He gave her the microphone, and she started a lecture right there in the middle, and Rob the joke was, Rob said, Pauline, please sit down. You're using my lecture time. So I was just blown away about how quickly and how rapidly programs that control our lives can be rewritten and how we can start with a brand new life. And I'd like to now turn it over to my hero, Rob Williams, who created the Psyche process, which allows us to re-empower ourselves.
Oh, wow. Go, Rob.
Yeah, well, thanks, Bruce. It was, I remember that event very well as well, and I remember also that you were still as appropriately scientifically skeptical about what you had seen, thought it was some kind of trick or wouldn't last. And the following year, we were both back at that same conference and both speakers again, and you immediately found Pauline and quizzed her about, well, so what's happened in the last year? And that thing you did with that guy, Rob Williams? And she said, well, I went home. She was lived in Florida. She said, I joined Toastmasters and started winning the tabletop awards for spontaneous talking. She also ended up hosting a version of that conference in Florida, and she really moved into being a public speaker. So for Bruce, I think the important thing was he saw that it does, in fact, last. It's a long-lasting process. It's not based on needing to repeat an affirmation over and over or support it in any other way. Just do the activity, which essentially triggers the application that's inside. If you think of it as an app, in today's jargon, that's what it was. It was an app for public speaking, and she had it now. And once she has the software, all she has to do is move into the behavior, and sure enough, all those beliefs that kept her from speaking comfortably in public were now completely changed into ones that said, I'm looking at friends now instead of terrified at a bunch of blank faces. She told me that's what it was like in the first part of the conversation with her about what's it like when you look out at the audience. She says, I don't see faces. I just see flesh. I can't see an individual out there, which told me a lot in terms of how she was wired from a left and right hemisphere of the brain point of view. She could see the big picture, which is a right hemispheric function generally, but she couldn't see the details. So her left hemisphere was definitely being unactivated in that situation. She wasn't actively accessing that capability. So when the balance process, like Bruce said, takes about 10 minutes to do, was complete, all of a sudden she could report that she saw individual faces. So both hemispheres were working, and this is a very good thing. When both hemispheres of our brains are working at the same time, not sequentially, but simultaneously, we achieve what's called a whole brain state, where our full potential is available to us. Not only is it available to us, but it's a very user-friendly environment in which to contact the subconscious mind and make the changes, literally rewriting the software Bruce is talking about. So that was a real transformational moment for both of us, because as we talked about what each of our areas of expertise was, we realized there was a perfect fit, a complete story. The thing I love about listening to Bruce's work when we were at the conference was, oh, that's how come people get the way they are. And his thing was, oh, and that's how you can change it. So there couldn't have been any better balance between the two of us, and consequently, in the near future after that, we began to work together and found a very, very beautiful experience, not only for us, because it was way fun, but for the people that came, because they got the left brain analytical science about this is how it happens. So it's very grounded. This is the deal. And then it was, okay, and now let's move into experience and learn how to rewrite that software. So that's why it's so much fun for us to get a chance to work together.
I can see why. So I know you can't actually do a process here, but can you give us some sense of how it's possible, first of all, how the subconscious gets established? I know it happens when we're very young, and how you can actually go in and change things, as you said, put in a new app or take out an old app or whatever it is. How do you do that, and why is it permanent?
Well, if I could talk about the program first, Rob.
Please.
Very simply, this is that I use an analogy in my lectures, and I say, look, we go to the store and we buy a brand new iPod. And I say that little wheel on the front, which they call the click wheel, is like the conscious creative mind, because the click wheel is creative. I can make a playlist. I can suggest what I want to play and put in order and do everything with that click wheel. And so I say, look, I buy a brand new iPod. I take it out of the box, and I push play on the click wheel, and nothing happens. And people in the audience, oh yeah, well you didn't put any programs into the iPod, so nothing can play. And I go, precisely the same thing happens in the human mind. Basically, to be conscious, you actually have to have some programs to be conscious of. So, for example, if a newborn child could speak the moment it was born and it was coming out of the birth canal, and then you'd say to the child, tell us something, the child would look up at you and go, look, I don't know anything, I just got here. And so basically what happens is our biology is designed for the first 7 years to not have consciousness as a predominant brain state. In fact, consciousness really becomes predominant after age 7. What that means is the first 7 years, our brain is operating at a lower vibrational frequency than consciousness, which is calm consciousness is alpha vibration in EEG terminology, and the lower vibration is called theta. Theta is imagination. Well, a child's brain is predominantly in theta through the first 7 years, and that's why children are so effective at mixing the real world and the imaginary world together, because that is the vibrational activity of the brain of a child before 7. Well, theta is not only imagination, theta is hypnosis. And so basically, the human brain is designed to download programs for 7 years and then kick in consciousness as a predominant state after 7. So the significance is you get a database of how to operate and become an effective person in the world. I mean, think about this. How many things must a child learn to become an effective member of a family and a community and a culture? Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, it's thousands of things, rules and understandings of how to function in this community. And the idea is, well, you can't teach an infant these rules by just sitting him down at a desk and say, listen, here are the lessons. And the interesting thing is, well, we don't have to, because nature has already taken care of that. By putting the child's brain in theta for the first 7 years, everything the child sees or hears or experiences is directly downloaded into the subconscious mind. And this is where the original programs of behavior come from. This is how a child learns how to deal with other children, how a child learns how to deal with adults. By observing the parents and how they do it, they just copy these, okay? So most important fact is this. The fundamental behavior of a human is programmed in the first 7 years via hypnosis. It doesn't go through conscious filtering. Consciousness is not even working. So an infant is downloading programs, is not really aware of the nature of the programs, it's just recording them. And the significance about that is now we recognize that these behaviors actually control most of our lives for a very simple reason. The conscious mind is a creative mind. It has your wishes, your desires, your aspirations. I say, listen, tell me what you want from your life. And you say, oh, I want to be healthy, I want to have a great relationship, I want to have a great job. And I go, good. These answers come from the conscious creative mind. That's the nature of consciousness, creativity. The significance of the conscious mind is not only that it's creative, that it can also think. And this is where the monkey wrench gets thrown into the machine, for this simple reason. When we go off into thought, we disconnect from the current moment. So if I ask you, what are you doing next Sunday? In that moment of thought about when you're in your head, you're calculating what you're doing next Sunday, by definition, the conscious mind is no longer paying attention to the present moment. It's shifted off into the database of where you're going to be on Sunday. It's not paying attention. The significant character of that is when the conscious mind's not paying attention, it doesn't mean we just stop. In other words, if you're walking down the street and you have a thought, you don't freeze until the thought is complete. You keep walking, and the thought is going on. Well, how do you keep walking? The answer is, when the conscious mind is in thought, behavior by default is controlled by the subconscious programming. Now comes the biggest problem, and that is this. Science has revealed that 95% of the day, our conscious mind is in thought. By definition, then, 95% of the day, the conscious mind's not paying attention to the current moment. And then, by definition, during that 95% time period, our behavior is controlled by the subconscious. And then I go, oh, well, wait a minute. The behaviors in the subconscious don't reflect our wishes and desires and aspirations. The behaviors in the subconscious were acquired by observing other people's behavior, our parents, our family, our community. And so it says 5% of the day, our creative conscious mind is taking us toward our destination of wishes and desires. 95% of the day, we are defaulting to the subconscious programs, which, again, are not really necessarily reflecting our wishes and our desires. The significance about this is that when the conscious mind is busy, we don't observe our own subconscious behaviors. So if we have subconscious behaviors that are sabotaging, limiting, or disempowering, it says that 95% of the day we're playing these behaviors, but we don't see it. Just to give a quick story on that I give in a lecture is I ask people in the audience, I say, look, I'm sure if you go back in your life, you were very close to a friend and you knew your friend's behavior very, very well. And you also happen to know your friend's parent. And then one day you realize that your friend has some of the exact same behavior as their parent. So you volunteer something like, hey, you know, Bill, you're just like your dad. And then I say, back away from Bill. Because the moment you say that, Bill goes ballistic and says, how can you compare me to my dad? The audience laughs because everyone is familiar with it. And I say, this is the most profound story I can tell you for this reason. Everyone else can see that Bill behaves like his dad. The only one who doesn't see it is Bill. Reason is this. The behavior that he's expressing from his dad, he downloaded in the first 7 years of his life. He plays it because his conscious mind's not paying attention, so he's the one that doesn't see it. So basically it says that 95% of our life, up to that amount, is controlled by behavior that doesn't represent who we are and what we want in our lives. And it's invisible to us, so we invisibly sabotage our lives. And then because it's invisible, these behaviors that are undermining us, there's a tendency for us to say, oh, my goodness, I'm a victim because I really wanted this in my life, and it never happened, so the universe must be against me. And that's because we were ourselves not aware of these unconscious programs that were self-sabotaging. So the most important understanding right now is that our lives are not necessarily controlled by our wishes and desires conscious mind. They're really controlled by the programming that we acquired in the first 7 years, and psychologists tell us 70% or more of that program is disempowering and limiting, and therefore we struggle through our lives and we don't see that we are creating the problem, not the universe. And if we understand this, we can go back into that subconscious and change it. And just before I turn it over to Rob, because that's where the meat comes from, to recognize that the conscious mind, subconscious mind are two interdependent elements. They're not the same. You can educate the conscious mind, but it does not in any way change subconscious programming. So this is the problem when people say, well, look, I read this self-help book. I know the contents of the book. I can take a test. I'll get 100. But then I say, well, now that you read the book and you know the contents, has your life changed? And most people say, no, not really. I go, well, that's because we educate the conscious mind, but that does not necessarily translate into subconscious reprogramming. So basically it says we have made a mistake in trying to understand how to educate that subconscious mind. That's where I was caught at the end of the lecture when people say, well, okay, how do I change it? And that's now why I so happily turn it over to Rob, because his ingenuity and his awareness created this wonderful mechanism of how to rewrite those limiting programs. And once we do that, and I'll just leave it very simply here, the conscious mind's a creative mind, and there's one time in our lives when the conscious mind is dominant and doesn't default to the subconscious mind. And scientists have recognized that when we fall deeply in love with somebody, there's a period where we keep our conscious mind present. We stay mindful. And I say, well, what was the consequence of staying present and mindful? And I say, the consequence is something we call the honeymoon. The honeymoon is no matter how bad your life might be running until you meet this special person. All of a sudden you meet this person and it's like you're filled with health, you glow with love, you have energy, and life is so beautiful. And it's just like heaven on earth because it's so wonderful. I go, wow, life really sucked. You fell in love. all of a sudden there's heaven on earth. And I say, well, what was the difference? And science has now recognized it's the one time that we don't default to subconscious programming. It's the one time where we stay in the conscious mind and our life is created from our wishes and desires, and we manifest this heaven on earth. And unfortunately for most all of us, the honeymoon is short-lived for a very simple reason. There's a point where life is still going on. You have to fix the car, pay the rent, do the chores. And when those things start to come back into our mind and our conscious mind starts thinking, then we default to the subconscious programming, which has all those limiting programs and disempowering programs. And when we start playing those unconsciously, our honeymoon experience disappears. And so basically it says, wow, what would happen if your subconscious programs matched your conscious wishes and desires? And the answer would be you would have a honeymoon experience every day of your life for as long as you live, because while you're conscious, of course you're running it from wishes and desires, but if you slip into thought and you default into subconscious, but it has the same programs, that means you will continuously be running wishes and desires. And that is the magic and secret of life, and that is the magic behind Rob Williams' Psyche process. And I think that's a good introduction now to turn it over to Rob.
That's a wow introduction.
This is your big chance, Shifra. Do you want to say anything before we start talking?
That's really kind of you.
I'm giving you an opening.
You know what? I want to hear what you have to say about it. Of course, I'm like making notes madly as you're talking, and one of the things I wanted to ask Bruce just stepped into, if can the conscious and subconscious be brought to work together, and how. And it's just so fascinating that we start out, at least according to the way Bruce just described our process, we start out from birth till 7 not even being ourselves. And then it seems like the goal, the target, the purpose, whatever you want to say, from a more spiritual point of view, is for us to take that background, which is continuously pulling us in the direction of our history, our collective history, and instead start to superimpose, as you say, our wishes and desires, moving us into destiny. That's all. I just want to know more about. It's utterly fascinating. I mean, it's just it's so simple and yet so vast. But how do we bring our conscious and subconscious to work together? So I want to know more about how Psyche does that, at least theoretically. And then are there other ways? Because people do end up, that 5% of the day not moving, 5% of the day we move toward our wishes and desires, and the 95% we don't. I feel like that used to be true for me, but I feel like it's far from true for me now. So something is happening. There must be other ways as well, although Psyche is obviously extremely powerful and extremely fast. So both of those things.
Okay. I'll start there. Language-wise, I'll make a few comments. Number one, Bruce was talking about what you just said was we're not ourselves from birth to 7. Well, in a sense, there is no self because we're busy trying to figure out who we're supposed to be and how to survive in our respective biological families. So we're learning how to be someone that can survive. So if your biological family has a bunch of limiting beliefs and you learn to survive that set of limiting beliefs, by the time you hit 7 and you become more conscious, more beta brainwave state aware, then you run those programs. That's the issue. Really, you run those programs ad nauseum unless there's some way to change them if they're not serving you. And let's be realistic, too. In some families, you had great parents, and the way you were raised and the subconscious beliefs you got programmed in from 0 to 7 actually are helpful, and some of them aren't. So it's those cases where you really got a lot of negative messages that maybe about you're worthless and you're not going to ever amount to anything, and the typical, stereotypical kinds of programs we get about, girls aren't smart, boys have to be tough and never cry, and all of that stuff, which is not very useful in the world at all. But it turns out that many of us have those kinds of beliefs, depending on your culture and the epoch in which you were born and so on. So, yeah, it is important to be able to discern the beliefs to keep, because some of them are functional, and the ones that you wish to change because they're no longer worthy of who you are or who you're becoming. So that's one thing I wanted to say about that. The other is in terms of, well, aren't there other ways besides Psyche to change? Well, of course there are. It's called life, number one. In other words, you motor along in life, and all of a sudden you hit a stone wall, metaphorically speaking, hopefully. But it's the kind of thing where pain, which is, I believe, still the master teacher on our planet in terms of spiritual evolution, when things are bad enough and you hurt enough or you're scared enough or you're hopeless enough, then that's usually in times of crisis, trauma, drama, where people finally make the leap to a new way of behaving, a new thought pattern, and so on. And certainly it works. It's been working for thousands and thousands of years. I would submit that it's probably the most painful, difficult, and unpleasant way to evolve. And that's why I think this information called Psyche, and I'll say was given to me. My ego would love to say, gee, Rob, you're really a smart guy. You sat down and figured this out one day. That's not how it happened at all. I was in a complete state of disarray emotionally, very put out and angry at myself for making some mistakes when I was trying to put together a flyer in another discipline that I was teaching at the time in my own evolutionary process. And it wasn't working. I got really angry at myself. I kept making the same mistake over and over, and I thought, what is going on here? Felt like somebody or something was out to get me. I got pretty paranoid and angry about it. And essentially, this was back in 1988. It was in December of 88, and I was so mad at myself for these ridiculous errors that I went outside. I was in my house at the time and at my computer creating this flyer. And I got angry, went outside, and just gritted my teeth and clenched my fists and said, okay, God, if you don't want me to do this, what do you want me to do? I was really angry, venting. It wasn't exactly in the full lotus position in a state of samadhi, hardly. So, again, it was that sort of moment in life when I was so frustrated and I allowed something in because I said, if you don't want me to do this, what do you want me to do? And even though it was phrased as an accusation more than it was a question, I was given the answer immediately within just a few seconds, I think. I don't know. I kind of lost sense of time. An entire pattern. It's called a core belief balance, 13 paired statements, and the entire instruction set on how to use it was presented in my mind. And I'm saying that was really strange to me because I can't even visualize on command. If I close my eyes, my screen goes dark. So I was lousy at a lot of the spiritual processes in the early days, 50 years ago, when visualization was everything. And I could never visualize, so I thought I was just spiritually behind everyone else, and I'm a little embarrassed and ashamed about that. But the way this happened was I could see it. I could see the instructions in my mind, like in a teleprompter, like watching a teleprompter. And it was going slow enough I went back inside immediately, started typing the information I saw in my head into my little computer at the time. And when the teleprompter was finished, so to speak, and I had captured the information, it disappeared in my head. I can't get it back to this day, but I had a hard copy of it. And over the course of about 2 or 3 months, December 88 and early 89, a series of these patterns were presented to me in similar fashion, not necessarily at convenient times, but nevertheless I could write them down. Mm-hmm. So I can't take, if I'm anything, I'm the original conduit for Psyche, but certainly not the creator of it per se. I believe it to be extremely ancient, and that this is a modern iteration, a modern version of it, that this society at this time, which so needs to be able to do high-speed mindset change, and that's why it's here. It's here to help with the shift that's going on. It's almost unarguable at these days, even with mainstream people saying, "Oh, what are you talking about, this shift?" Well, you asked early on in the program, so what do you think's going on here in the last, say, year or 6 months? Well, I can tell you, having an international training organization in almost every country, or teaching at least in every country, that it's chaos is out there. We've reached a space and a place in the evolutionary cycle where it's almost impossible to ignore what's going on around you anymore and just sticking your head in the sand and hope it's all better sometime in the future. You either have to become a part of the solution or you're going to stay a part of the problem. And so it's an activation, action time, in my opinion, and that's what I love about doing Psyche and why it was such a tremendous gift to me personally, is it took my whole understanding of the collective consciousness of humanity and spiritual evolution to a whole new level of understanding. So Psyche, while it has some technique parts, and that's the part that most people relate to if I talked about that, That's one thing. And yes, there are things you do and activities and movements and all that. But the main thing that animates it, Shifra, it really is an overall cosmology, a belief system that is steeped in the spiritual understanding that we are first and foremost spiritual beings having a human experience, to quote Chardin, at least close enough. And the whole idea here is if we, a long time ago, for many of us anyway, there was a huge disconnect from that reality, and we've been operating at the physical level only for eons. And I think that this is all about the reconnection to one's divine truth. Who you actually are is the divine being, and that's an unlimited being. The limitations come because we have a bunch of limiting beliefs that we're not that. I mean, we have an exaggerated belief in our unimportance, if you will.
And everyone else's too.
That's right. Well, because you can't see yourself as that divine being, then we suffer from what I call the illusion of separation disorder. You know, as 14 years I spent as a psychotherapist, and I often use the DSM code book, the one that psychologists, psychiatrists use to identify a particular process, mostly for insurance companies. But the idea was that, all right, so what's really the problem here? Was all manner of, thousands and thousands of disorders. But for me, the epiphany came one day that there's really only one disorder and all the others are subsets, and that's because we believe I'm not a part of you, you're not a part of me, and we're not a part of the divine intelligence that creates the system and animates it. So if we were to literally address that, then all these other things that we think we have to be happy and healthy and all of that would vanish. I mean, like in thin air, practically overnight. Because our bodies, like Bruce was talking about epigenetic signals, imagine a consistent epigenetic signal, meaning a thought pattern that automatically from the subconscious level of the mind informs the body that it's spiritually perfect, that everything about your life and all of that is available for you to rewrite, to animate, and to gear towards this perfection that you actually do have and don't recognize. So once you're living from that place of divine consciousness, then everything else in your life, your behaviors, your thoughts, your physiology, all of that will line up. And that's really, in my opinion, it's the originator or original conduit for this stuff. That's the point of it. That's why it's here. It's not just to get you a better mate or more money or a better job or, optimal health, or all those things are fine, and that's where most people enter what I'll call the psyche thought form hologram. Well, this is what I want. What's interesting to me, and I think it's a big deal right now, it sure has shown up for me over the years, is that people often know what they want because society's told them what they should want. They seldom know what they need spiritually. We've got it exactly backwards. If you step fully into the presence of your divineness, everything else that you want will change because your priorities of what you think you have to achieve this state of being at peace in your own skin and being a vital part of the collective will shift. So that's really, in my opinion, where all of this needs to go, and what's going on is people are waking up to their connectedness, interconnectedness, which is one of the key principles of of nature itself. I mean, if you look at how nature runs this planet, and you start taking a look at the patterns and the wisdom that nature uses, interconnectedness is one of the main ones. Collaboration. Bruce can talk to this issue. Nature is not based on competition. It's based on cooperation and collaboration. And yet you don't see too much of that in our world. Because, and I'd love for Bruce to address this. He does it so beautifully, having to do with, when I started working with him, one of the things he just hammered home every time we worked together was, you know what, if we paid attention to Mother Nature, the original instructions on how to tend the garden here, it was very much a kind of Garden of Eden kind of place, metaphorically at the very least. But we haven't. We've really walked away from those core principles, and only the indigenous cultures of the world seem to remember anything about Mother Earth. The industrial world sees it as a commodity and chops it up into bits and sells it. The corporate world that I told you, where you actually said it in my bio, was where I learned that that's how most corporate entities view the planet and everything on it as something that can be divided up into parcels and sold in a commercial way. I was so, how can I say, taken aback by that, and I thought there's got to be a wake-up call here. So much of what I do these days and what Psyche and its sister version is called PERK, P-E-R-K, just pronounced as one word. It's the business version of it because so much needs to be leveraged in business. If business people wake up with the kind of spheres of influence and the kind of resources they have to see that what they're doing is creating a terminal version of reality here. If they want sustainability, you're going to have to go back and ask your Mother Nature, how to run a business, because if those businesses were running on the principles of nature, none of this would be a problem.
Well, so before we hand it over to Bruce, I want to just add one piece. I mean, what you've said is so profound, and the picture that you're painting. So I'd like to, Bruce, if you're going to speak more to this, I'd like to ask you to speak to it not only on an individual personal level, which is really important, but also on a macro level. What's happening in our world? You know, we talk about corporations, we could talk about governments, we could talk about exploitation, we could talk about all kinds of things. How does this process of reclaiming our own selves happen, both on a personal level and then ultimately on a planetary level, on that macro level? And I also would like to ask you, if you don't mind, to talk a little bit about the concept of the imaginal selves and how that works within our being, and then how does that work for us as a global community when, and even if you want to use the example of a butterfly, I've been wondering about this for ages, what is it that catalyzes, you know, there's a certain, like Rob said, a breakdown, what catalyzes the reorganization process so that it starts to move away from breakdown and into reconstitution?
Well, let's start off with this very big issue right now that we're facing planetarily, and that is this. 5 times in the history of this planet, life was thriving and then got wiped out. They're called mass extinctions. The previous 5 mass extinctions have been attributed to things like comets or asteroids hitting the planet, or periods of massive geological upheaval wiping out the web of life. And each time after these extinctions occurred, the leftover pieces of life reorganized and then they changed evolution and there was a whole new wave of evolution. What's very interesting that we have to face is a simple reality because it's hitting us in the face right now, and that is we are now deep into the 6th mass extinction of life. Science has recognized we're losing species of organisms faster than even in the previous 5 mass extinctions. But what's most interesting is science has also come to the realization that the problem, the cause of the current mass extinction is human behavior. So basically, we've acquired so much power through our technology and so little wisdom about the nature of balance and harmony in the environment that our technology is actually throwing a big monkey wrench into the mechanism, and our technology is destroying the environment, which is leading to our own extinction. In fact, NASA just had a massive scientific report that revealed that industrial civilization, which is what we're part of, only has a few decades left before it totally collapses. So
wow.
This is not like, 100 years from now or 200 years. No, we're talking within 10, 20, 30 years, this upheaval is going to be so confrontational in regards to whether we survive or not that we must start making changes now. One of the issues that has precipitated this problem is actually the two previous, the current civilization and the previous civilization have separated us from nature. Let's go back to the previous civilization, which was run by the church. It was Judeo-Christian monotheism was really the primary belief system controlling that civilization. And we go back and we say, well, how did we get here? And they say, well, the earth and the environment and all the plants and animals were created, and then humans were added on top of all this with the concept of being a dominant force and controlling all this. So we were given control of nature according to Genesis and the spiritual tradition. Well, the problem with that is it separated us from nature. Nature was here, then we got here, and we're not part of nature. Well, that was already a big problem. Science came in with a different story, but still ended up with the same result because science said, oh, no, it wasn't the Genesis story. It's evolution. But the problem with the evolution story of science is that there's a 2-step process in evolution. The first step is called a random mutation, And then the second step is if that mutation is beneficial or detrimental, nature will select. If it's beneficial, nature selects that new mutation and brings it into the world. If it's detrimental, nature will select against it. So, but the problem about it is, if I ask a scientist, why are we here? The conventional answer is, well, there's no reason. It was just a matter of accidents of genetic mutations. So there was no purpose or intention for us to be here. Well, this is completely a misunderstanding, a Darwinian belief that is unfortunately not only causing that problem, but when you say, well, what is the meaning of Darwinian evolution? And it's really summed up in the phrase that life is a struggle for survival with a competition for fitness. Well, when you make that a human story that all humans buy into, that it's a dog-eat-dog world and that we're out there, and if you don't compete, you're going to lose, then you see the kind of world we end up with, where people are against each other, they're out for themselves, they're not recognizing they're part of a whole environment. And this is, again, the misleading story that has brought us to the edge of our own extinction, because it turns out this is not true. Every organism that was introduced into the environment by nature was introduced to maintain harmony and balance. So if one organism gets out of line and gets too destructive of the environment, nature brings in another organism that will cut back on that other one. And so it's like adding, every time nature adds a new organism, it's an effort to create harmony and balance. And then you look at where we are in that evolutionary unfolding, and you say, oh my goodness, we're near the top of this control of balance. And then you realize, yeah, we're so powerful at the top of this control that we can shift the balance. And without any knowledge that there was a balance, this technology and power we wield is actually now destructive to the balance, and that's why we're precipitating our own extinction. So new thought, new belief, new understanding is coming in and say, no, we didn't get here by accident. We are part of a community, and we have to understand the nature of harmony. The story that we were programmed with is self-destructive, and therefore we are in a stage right now that says you cannot continue this anymore. We must go back. And it's interesting because, as Rob mentioned, there are still indigenous people here, and they're our primary teachers for a simple reason. They're the only ones that still know how to speak to the earth and how to talk to the environment and to the biosphere. And so we really have to take the wisdom of the indigenous people and bring it into our world with high technology. That this is not a lost situation. There are many people, even James Lovelock, the scientist who gave us the Gaia principle, that the planet is a living system. He gave us that really wonderful insight into the nature that this is one giant community. But even today, Lovelock has said, well, it's too late. It's, we've gone beyond the point of no return. The thing is going to fail, and there's nothing we can do about it. And that's quite an unfortunate situation to hear from some science. But he doesn't recognize something that's really critical, and it's called spontaneous remission. You look at a human being and you say, oh, my God, this person is suffering from terminal disease. He's going to die in a couple of months. And the doctor says to that patient, listen, go home and take care of your final details. You know, the end is near. And many of the people do that, go home, do the final details, and then die when the doctor suggested they would die. But then there are some people who take that warning from the doctor, and then they say, well, look, if I only have a little bit of time left, then I'm letting go of my worries, my struggles, my concern. If I only have a little bit of time left, I'm going to go out and take my last few weeks of life and go out and enjoy life. And what do? They let go of the old beliefs that created the problem. And instead of 1 month or 2 months as suggested, there's 3, 4, 5, 6 months. They're a year down the road, 2 years down the road, and they're still alive and they're healthier than they ever were before. We refer to that as a spontaneous remission of a disease. The relevance is what caused that spontaneous remission. The answer was a change of belief and behavior. And why is that relevant? Because the spontaneous remission that a human can have is the same kind of spontaneous remission the planet can have. It's a living system. If we change our beliefs and our behavior, it doesn't mean it's going to end. We can turn this thing around, but it really requires the collective nature of a large population to engage in this new belief and this new way of life. And this is what's happening right now. There's a falling apart of the old system. The structure is coming down. But unfortunately for most people, we see the current crises as fear. Oh, my God, there's peak fuel crisis, there's climate change crisis, there's healthcare crisis, there's economic crisis. And I go, well, wait a minute. All of this is not bad. And what do you mean it's not bad, Lipton? And I go, well, why? Here's why it's not bad. We need to build a new civilization. The current civilization is creating the problem. Therefore, in order to build a new civilization, we have to start with a new foundation, because the current foundation is the cause of the problem. So you could look at the world and say, oh, my God, it's falling apart, I'm scared to death. Or you could look at it like I do and go, oh, my God, this is really great. It's falling apart because it's necessary. It has to fall apart before you can build the new world. So it's not a negative thing that we're seeing. We're seeing an unfolding of an old belief system that is causing the world trauma, and this is giving the opportunity for evolution to occur. You mentioned earlier about the concept of metamorphosis, and it's interesting because as in my research, what I emphasize is that a cell is the equivalent of a miniature human being, and I emphasize it on the basis of a simple fact, is that every function in your human body is already present in almost every one of your cells. Every cell has a respiratory, digestive, excretory, nervous system, reproductive system. Every cell even has an immune system. So when you look inside your body, we have 50 trillion cells. So there are 50 trillion miniature people living in harmony and creating a world. So I say, well, let's go to the caterpillar. And I say, okay, inside the caterpillar we have a few billion cells, few billion miniature people. This caterpillar goes out, and it's in a stage of growth. And it's very interesting because as the caterpillar is growing, guess what? It's very destructive of the environment. If you've ever seen any plants that caterpillars love, once the eggs are laid on the plants in a very short time, all the leaves are gone and the plant's almost dead. But then guess what happens? At that moment, there's a change, and the change is this. The caterpillar stops growing. It's reached the limitation. It's put itself in an environment where that's the end. No more growth at this moment. And what happens is the caterpillar, with all those billions of citizens in it, stops moving. It stops eating. And if you were one of the cells in that caterpillar body, you'd look around and you'd say, oh, my God, the environment's collapsing, that the economy is closed down. I'm a muscle cell, but I don't have a job. We're not moving. I'm a digestive cell. I don't have a job. We're not digesting. There's turmoil in the system. There's a coming apart. The cells start to break down. The community starts to break down. But what's most interesting is in the same community, they're genetically identical cells, but they see the world in a different way. They respond to it in a different way. Those are the imaginal cells. Well, the significance is in the middle of all this chaos, the imaginal cells start to organize the cells around them. And from that new vision, from that new organization, what emerges is an entire new structure, a butterfly, which escapes the old skin and then enters into the next phase of life in this beautiful form. Well, Earth today is in late caterpillar stage, and we're pushed the envelope, and all of a sudden we're seeing the turmoil. Yeah, the chaos is happening. People are losing their jobs, so the whole thing is turning upside down. And yet, guess what? In the middle of all this chaos, there are so many imaginal cells out there, including this wonderful show that you have right here, Shifra, is part of the imaginal cell. What are you providing? New awareness, new insights, a new way to live. And this is important because as the other cells around us are in chaos, we're looking for this new story. Well, the new story is unfolding. It's happening everywhere. The Arab Spring is a great example of that, the falling down of an old limiting structure and the creation of something new. Well, birth is not a simple process. There's blood loss in birth, and there's some pain in the birth, but this is what leads us into the new world. So the civilization we're in, late-stage caterpillar, is now beginning to align with the imaginal cells, the people offering new wisdom, new insights, new ideas, new ways of life. And we're restructuring to live in a world where we'll manifest the equivalent of the butterfly stage. And butterflies are not destructive of the environment. And so as we move out of this old one, we're going through chaos It's a very important chaos, but it's also very important that this show and others like it are really the beacon of a new thought and a new belief that says it looks scary, it looks bad, but evolution is precipitated by crisis. If there's no crisis, nobody's going to change. But crisis causes us to come to, like, we hit the wall, we got to do something different. Now we're being pushed into the evolution, and it's unfolding around us. And so this is a very wonderful, unique opportunity for our planet, because if we continue the old way with the old story and the old belief, extinction is immediately in front of us. And yet, spontaneous remission, a spontaneous healing, a spontaneous evolution is immediately in front of us. And we're beginning to see people move out of the old story, and more people are leaving behind the old story and going into the new story. And this is very critical, because if we stay in the old story and fight the old story, we're wasting our energy and our time. What we have to do is disconnect from the old story, step into the new story, put all our energy into the new story, because this is where evolution is coming from. And so in the darkness that we see, the light is the light of the imaginal selves. It's the light of new vision. It's the light of new consciousness. It's things that giving us more empowerment. It's the new science of epigenetics. It's the understanding that Rob offers in Psyche, as well as many other people involved with belief modification and belief change work. We have to change the story, because the story we are creating as life, and the old story of competition and struggle has led us to this moment of full-out competition, full-out struggle, and then we realize, oh, my God, that was not the story of nature. That nature is, as Rob already mentioned, nature's a garden. A garden is not a battleground. A garden is a cooperative community. So all of a sudden, cooperation. And it's really interesting, because the big evolutionary step that is leading us into this new world is the development of a global nervous system. It was the Internet. The Internet allows us to connect 7 billion people, which are cells. So the evolution that's in front of us is actually very interesting. It's not the evolution of an individual human. We're not changing our human biology. What we're changing is the organization of humans. Rather than independent competitive agents, the new evolution is an evolution of coming together in one giant community. 7 billion human cells are creating a superorganism called humanity. It's the evolution of humanity that is the golden threshold of our future, and bringing us all together is the kind of work that you're doing, Shifra, with this network of saying, look, there's a new story. Let's get on board.
Wow. There's so much there, but even the thing that you just said about the evolution of a global nervous system, describing the Internet that way, that just really put some pieces together for me, because I've been feeling that. You can feel, especially I don't know if you're aware, but I'm sitting here in Jerusalem. We moved to Jerusalem a couple of years ago, and a couple hours before the show, we had an air raid siren, and the communication that's going on in Facebook, the good resolutions people are making, the support they're giving each other, it's just remarkable. It's not like anything that I've experienced in the past. I never would have thought of it as a collective nervous system. That's an amazing concept, truly illuminating.
Well, it's really interesting, because I was just in Jerusalem a couple of months ago, where we presented what was called an uplift program, where we brought together Palestinians and Israelis, and it was really interesting. We bussed in a couple of hundred Palestinians. We met at Tel Aviv University. We had a big program. And the emphasis that I was so happy to participate with is this. Childhood programming is, because 95% of our life comes from that programming. When I revealed the nature of programming and how it influences our lives, I said, here's the problem. And remember, we had this whole mixed audience of Arabs and Israelis in there. And I showed this picture, and I said, here's the problem. And what I showed was two pictures. One, Israeli children playing with machine guns, and two, Arab children dressed in military uniforms with guns. And I said, as long as you keep training children with these belief issues, it will run their lives 95% of the time. Even though they all have conscious wishes to live in peace, 95% of their life is not coming from the conscious mind. It's coming from the program. And it was such a wake-up moment for the people in the audience. Like, oh, my God, we're programming continuous conflict by programming children to hate and to see war as a way out. And it was such a wonderful experience because at the end, the sharing between the Arabs and the Israelis at that university program, in the end, they were sharing food, they were dancing together, and they started to realize that in our conscious minds, we are really the potential heroes of the world. We just have to rewrite those subconscious programs. And if there was a big, massive Psyche program for that area right now, the conflict would end because people are not doing this out of their conscious wishes. They're doing this out of automatic reflex of programs that were downloaded in their first 7 years.
Wow, that's crazy. That's really crazy.
But let me just close with this part.
Yeah, sure,
because
please.
I just got a letter from one of our Uplift program people there who wrote how he and his children for the third time that day were going into the shelter because of the air raid stuff and all that. And he said, in spite of all of this, the awareness of the hope of the change and the future that we can create is enlightening them that maybe enough people at this moment of crisis, remember, crisis precipitates evolution. At this moment of crisis, there's a momentum if enough people say, that's it, let's stop. It can stop overnight. And so there's hope, and that's what I'd really like to encourage.
That's what you radiate in your demeanor, in your voice, in your facial expressions. When I see pictures of you online, I wanted to even ask you about that. What it is, and Rob as well, please. What it is that keeps you? I hear you saying crisis precipitates change and evolution, and that's fantastic. What is it that keeps you in that forward-looking, grounded space when your environment is also breaking down, and your global community is also at each other's throats, and your economy is also under threat, and so forth? So for both of you, really, I'm going to shove in two questions here. How do you keep yourself? What do you do for yourself to keep yourself as imaginal selves in that conscious, forward-thinking part of your mind? And also, how much of you talked about lifestyle and perceptions? How much of our power, our real power to be imaginal selves, to make real change, is in our perceptions and beliefs alone? Like, is that? I have a feeling that if the belief change is deep enough and powerful enough and global enough, it almost doesn't matter about the lifestyle, although I suppose the lifestyle would fall into place. But I'd really love to hear what both of you think about that.
I'd like to start before Rob because I want to lead into Rob about this, okay?
Sure.
And basically it says, look, the life that I have right now has so dramatically changed when I caught into the nature of how my subconscious programs were limiting me and sabotaging me, that once I understood how to rewrite those programs and put my wishes and desires into the subconscious rather than the programs downloaded from my family and community, my life radically changed around. I started realizing that right in the middle of all this stuff, I could still have peace and harmony and live in the garden. And I started to realize that's because my creative consciousness is creating the world. It's very interesting because when quantum physics first came in 1925, the original pioneers of quantum physics stated emphatically that it's consciousness that is creating the world as a physics mechanism. And we lost that story because conventional physicists at that time were very skeptical of everything, and so they didn't really buy into it, but we're coming back to that. And so by changing this consciousness, we change the world in which we live. You can walk across the hot coals if your consciousness is designed to do so. So you could be in the middle of a fire and not be burned by it. And so the reality is, changing this consciousness is the most important step in the evolution of humanity, and that's why I just wanted to precede Rob on this, because it was through Rob's work that I was able to change my life and even write the books that I have by eliminating those conflicting programs that I acquired. And as I said, you can be in the middle of the fire and not feel it and not touch it. And that's what we all have to learn, is that we can buy into the fire and get burned, or we could walk through the fire. And walking through the fire is what we need right now. And this is really a nature of your consciousness, and that's why it's so important to recognize the value of reprogramming those disempowering and limiting beliefs, because they create that scary world for us. And you could be the same person, different beliefs, and live in that same world but not even see it. And that's what we need to do right now, and that's why I so honor Rob's work.
And it requires true autonomy, from what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. We have to do this individually. It's not going to come from a government. It's only going to come from us. And so it's really the effort and intensity is really on our part, not waiting for somebody on the outside to do it.
Wow. Breathtaking. Okay, Rob.
Well, the question, as I understood it back a while ago, was how do we stay as imaginal selves, as Bruce calls them? And for me, the answer is that I do what I teach. And if it didn't work, I'd do something else. I'm a very pragmatic mystic. And the only reason I've continued with Psyche for 26 years now is that I've not found an end to its utility. I've not found anything faster, safer, or geared specifically to include the spiritual component of my life. It's kind of the gatekeeper to Psyche. It's element of the, we call it the superconscious mind. You can put higher self to it, or whatever name works for you in that capacity. It's your spirit and your view of life from that spiritual point of view. It's sort of the gatekeeper to what I want. What I found out was interesting, and that along the way, is that I wanted a lot of things, but I didn't realize that those things were taught to me. I was supposed to want those things in this commercial-based economy and world, and these were all prerequisites to happiness. So I couldn't be happy until I had certain things and achieved certain things and so on. And I don't know, there was a moment of awakening that just said, that's not true. I can be happy anytime I want, no matter where I am, no matter what's going on externally. Like Bruce said, your outside circumstances are one thing, but how you perceive them determines how they affect you. So when I get to the place where I'm reading too much about what's going on in the world and all the pain and suffering that we create as human beings, unaware of our divine nature and our interconnectedness, if things pop up for me that make me less than imaginal in terms of knowing that we can make a difference, knowing that there are solutions to these problems, these opportunities, and all that, and that we don't have to have a crash landing in the economy and all the rest of it necessarily. We can have a soft landing. If we wake up in time, we can evolve rather than have a revolution. We can have an evolution of consciousness, and there's a whole lot less pain, suffering, and all of that involved with it. So yes, when it comes down to my own day-to-day life, if I run into a roadblock that I can clearly identify as a belief, and most of them are beliefs and perceptions that limit us and control our experience, I simply take a few minutes and change that belief. That's why I'm still doing this work. If it didn't work, I wouldn't do it. It does work, and that's why it's growing internationally, because right now, more than anything else, managing one's mind and not letting it be managed by other people, governments, or fill in the blank, the advertising industry, et cetera, this is an autonomous thing, and we do need to take control of our lives and become the masters of our lives and wake up to the truth of who we really are. As long as we believe we're less than that, we'll behave as less than that, and then it's much easier to control masses of people if they believe they're powerless. And there's nothing true about that except our belief in it.
Wow. So really, it starts very simple. You just have to break out of the illusion of our history and our culture and realize who you really are, or at least be committed to realizing who you really are, and then just use the techniques that are available like Psyche and
whatever works for
awaken
the
that.
individual is for it. This is not for everybody. It's for the people that wake up at a certain level of consciousness and say, I recognize that the work of that. I recognize the science behind it. I recognize the spirituality which imbues it and gives it its capacity, and they'll be drawn to it, kind of like a frequency, or music. Some people prefer certain kinds of music. Other people turn the dial to say, I can't stand that kind of music, and they turn it to some other channel. Whatever brings you to it. Many of the people that come to Psyche internationally, interestingly enough, when they get to a Psyche workshop taught by one of the certified instructors, and they're almost always asked, well, how did you hear about Psyche, or why are you here? And they say, I don't really know. I just know I'm supposed to be there. So it's not clever marketing. It's not anything like that. It's just the frequency of what it is, which I believe speaks deeply to the consciousness of people that are spiritually waking up. And so we try to make it easy to find Psyche, and so we have websites and so on, of course, at psyche.com, but that's not really the big deal. The big deal is when people reach a certain evolutionary stage, then they hear the frequency and they'll find it. They'll gravitate to it, like any other good idea in your own evolutionary process. So that's really how it works, Shifa, and it's really less about the technique and more about the spiritual philosophy that empowers it. And Psyche, I say this out loud, and this sort of surprises people. Psyche is not a powerful technique. I don't believe it's a technique. That's not what it really it's a process that you can do, or several processes, but it's not the power of it, so to speak, doesn't reside inside a technique. The power that Psyche has is the power to introduce you to the power you're looking for outside of yourself, which is already present inside you. And this is the key to unlocking that power and giving you control over the mechanism that's inside that Bruce talks about so eloquently. And by the way, he does a very, very wonderful job of doing so in his latest book called The Honeymoon Effect. He mentioned the honeymoon idea, but there's actually a book where he goes much more in depth in terms of how all that works, conscious and subconscious and all that. There is a superconscious component to all this. That's nested inside K. That's the gatekeeper to keep you from, well, you know how the cliche goes. It's be careful what you ask for because you might get it. Well, it certainly is helpful if you can know that there's a brick wall at the end of that desire. You chase it and you chase it and you get it and think, what was I thinking? Whether it's trying to partner with somebody or make a lot of money or get a job or move or whatever it is you think you have to do to find happiness. I say find it now and let the rest of it happen. So life will continue to happen and continue to evolve. You might as well be in that imaginal self state during your journey because really it's the journey, not the destination anyway.
Beautifully said, and it's the image that's coming to me is that whole butterfly image. Butterflies floating on the wind and just far more fluid and flexible and lighter than the caterpillar. So that's kind of where you're showing us, you're pointing to in our own consciousness that we want to be enjoying life, floating, flying, expressing our beauty right now, and then we can go where we want to go. Really powerful. I want to let people know where they can find out more about both of your work, and then if you still have some time, I'd love to take a caller or two, depending on how long they take. Is that okay? Do we still have time?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. All right, so let us first know where we can find out more about Psyche, how people can get to their own practitioners in their own areas, and then also, Bruce, if you could let us know where we could find out more about your work, get your books, whatever.
Okay,
Rob.
Rob.
You want to start?
Go ahead,
Okay,
Rob.
sure. Well, it's easy on this side. It's Psyche, Psych, a hyphen, the letter K. So psyche.com. We'll have all of the things, all the answers to the questions you just asked. There are individual facilitators, we call them, that just do that. They don't teach Psyche, but they are available to do sessions, Psyche sessions, some of them in person, of course, if you happen to live close to somebody. But it's also possible to do Psyche long distance, as it turns out. It's called surrogation, which is a higher self link up to the other person. And then the activities that take place can either be coached, you can be coached through sometimes various processes, or another way of doing it is the facilitator actually does the process once the connection is made and you get the immediate effect, which is very handy because you don't have to get on airplanes and go places. So that's one way. There's also a group that specializes in health and wellness issues. They're health and wellness facilitators. They're also listed on the Psyche website. And then there are the certified instructors. These people have gone through a rigorous training program to become certified in this particular process. and they are the ones that can teach it all over the world, and they do that. It's not just because they happen to live on one continent or another, but they're mostly all mobile and will come to your area. Classes have been taught for instance, in Israel and in Arab countries. As a matter of fact, it's interesting. Mm-hmm. It's sort of a transcontinental understanding, like Bruce has been saying and I've been saying in this conversation. It's really, we're really more connected and more alike than we imagine. It's the societal training that makes us different.
No doubt. And I'm really thankful that you're doing your work, not only because it's, so illuminating for me and so many others, but because the very idea that we're all connected means that when you're putting out these new ideas and creating these new techniques and running people through them, it's going to affect us all on a very, very deep level at the same time through that nervous system, whether it's the internet or something even deeper.
When you change yourself, you change the world. That's the bottom line. We're a fractal, as Bruce would call it, of both the problem and the solution. So let's move towards solution.
Absolutely, absolutely. Bruce, did you want to let people know where they can find out more about your work as well?
Very simple. There's a website, brucelipton.com, and there's lots of information that's freely downloadable about the stuff we're talking about. I mean, we, spoke in a very quick and short aspect about this, so it's like, wow, just touching on things. But there's a true deep science that is unfolding, a new science, and it's changing our planet, and people should be looking into it because it's a science of self-empowerment.
And I just want to bring back to everybody's attention, we're talking about global change and about personal change and finding new perspectives that will alter our lives and our behaviors. But I want to bring it back also to what you were talking about in the beginning, that when you create these deep perceptual changes, the body changes as well. Illnesses can heal. And I think that's a lot of the application that's occurring with epigenetics right now, that through working on those limiting beliefs, people's illnesses heal in themselves and in past generations and future generations, kind of untangling the web. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And it's really, there's just been a misunderstanding. And remember, our beliefs control our biology. And so when we have a belief that certain genes control who we are and what we are, we give up power unconsciously to those beliefs, and our mind will manifest what our programs are. So it's important for us to rewrite the programs, rewrite those beliefs, because up to now they're quite limiting and self-sabotaging. And the new epigenetics is so important because, listen, most everybody out there has been programmed with the belief that genes turn on and genes turn off and genes control our biology. And it's like, this is so false. It is so profoundly false, because genes are blueprints. And if you go into an architect's office and you ask the architect, is that blueprint you're working on, is it on or off? They look at you like, what are you, crazy? There's no on and off. And I go, precisely. Genes are just blueprints. It is the mind that is involved with reading the environment and interpreting the environment that then selects which genes are going to be read, and also, most importantly, can modify the readout of our genes so that you could have a mutant gene, but in the right environment and the right perception, it will read as a normal gene. Or, and unfortunately in the bigger case, you can have very healthy genes, but depending on the perception and the environment, you could read those genes in a very negative way and manifest illness. So all these years we've been blaming the genes, when it turns out, no, our mind is the one that can make a gene healthy or make a gene an unhealthy mutated version, not the genes. And why that's so important, as I said, is since we are the ones that control our mind, then we're not the victim of the gene. We just have to recognize we have mastery by changing the beliefs that are involved with selecting those genes.
This is tremendously exciting. It sounds like the mind is... go ahead, Rob.
I would just add one thing, that just to put it real succinctly, there are toxic beliefs that are immune-enhancing or immune-suppressing, depending on which beliefs you have, that affect your biology. No question about that. So in a field called psychoneuroimmunology, it's a long word for the mind-body connection. But what Bruce is saying is really profound to understand, that what you think gets communicated directly to the cells of your body. And one of the other things that he's brought out in the times we were working together is that an energy signal, which is a thought, is 100 times more potent in informing the body through the cellular mechanism to produce an effect than a chemical is outside the body. So think of it, how powerful your thoughts are, 100 times more powerful than stuff you put in your body. We don't hesitate to do physical cleanses, but Psyche, I would say, is a kind of mental cleansing. And when you shift the consciousness to these epigenetic signals coming from the subconscious that inform the body to stay well, their immune-enhancing beliefs, that's the effect you get.
Yeah, and it's just very interesting to stop and recognize this, because almost everyone is familiar with the concept called the placebo. And the placebo is you take this drug or you do this surgery with the belief that this is what's going to heal me, and you get healed, and then you find out it was just a sugar pill or a sham surgery, and then you have to realize it wasn't the pill and it wasn't the surgery that healed you, it was your belief that healed you. Well, I just want to emphasize this is because we talk about the placebo effect and everybody understands. I said that is the power of mind over body. And yet what I need to emphasize, because this is so critical, because it's the part of the story left out, and that is, yes, the placebo effect is the influence of positive thinking. But what is the consequence of negative thinking? And it turns out it's equally powerful to positive thinking, but works in the opposite direction. There's a scientific term for it, not placebo, which is positive thinking consequences. It's called the nocebo effect, and basically says a negative thought is equally powerful to positive thought, but the negative thought can get you sick, and you can actually die from a negative thought. And that's why we have to stop looking at the drugs and the pharmaceutical thing as our way out and recognizing, hell, you can do it with your thought with a placebo effect. Then why shouldn't we be working with our mind rather than with chemistry?
We seem to have no real concept of how powerful we are. Even when we talk about it, it's like it's so I'm feeling it so strongly that it's right here, right now, completely available. Just reach out and take it. I remember hearing Gary Null on the radio talking about a woman who had been diagnosed with a terminal, I guess, cancer, and she had, a month to live or 3 months to live, and she went on some kind of program with him, and she was completely healed. And a year later, no sign of anything. A year later, she went back to her original doctor, who poo-pooed everything natural, and she told him, "Look at me, I'm well." And he said, "This is nonsense. You're going to be dead in a week." And she was dead in a week.
Absolutely, and that's unfortunately
it's a horrible story, but
that is the truth. And one of my dear friends wrote a book, and many people in the audience have read it, but I think it's one of the most important books for insight, and it's called "Dying to Be Me" by Anita Moorjani. And Anita had cancer 4 years and did everything the medical world did, then tried a whole bunch of different things, and ended up in her last few days, her body function started shutting down. They put her on a machine. She was so emaciated that the cancer lumps were sticking through her skin, and she went into a coma. And her oncologist told the family, "Well, that's it. It's over. This is when our patients go there. That's the last thing. So be ready, because she has a very short time left right now." When she was in her coma, she had an out-of-body experience, which she describes in the book. But guess what? She came to the realization that her health issues were due to the programming she got as a child and how it conflicted with her life. It was the conflict that created the problem, and her fears of the cancer. What was totally relevant about this is, like many people with these out-of-body experiences, she was given an opportunity, like a choice. You could go back into your life or stay here. And it was so beautiful where she was that the thought of going back into her cancer-ridden body was like really negative, except that she realized that if she died, it would have a profound effect on her husband, who had spent the last few years of his life taking care of her. So she said, I'm going to go back. But she went back with the understanding that the issues were due to the way she was programmed and her fears. And what was so amazing was, in 5 days after she came out of the coma, that 70% of the cancer was gone, and in 2 weeks after that, all of the cancer was gone. And the relevance about that was, she is the textbook example of the nature of the biology of belief, that once she understood what the cause was and came back, she came back from terminal death, according to her oncologist, and came back to full health and has this most wonderful life today. And what was it? Not the chemistry, not the drugs, nothing other than recognizing how her programming precipitated the problem and how by changing that belief, the whole thing disappeared.
Yikes. Okay. Whoa. Do we still have time for a call?
I do.
Awesome. Okay, David, unmute somebody.
Edmonton, AB, what's that? I forget. Alberta.
Hello.
Hi. Who's
Hello.
Hello.
Are you speaking to me?
Yes.
We are.
Oh, wow. I'm so happy to be here. Look, is it possible? I've had kidney failure. I had a kidney. Now, I'm doing very well, and I'm not complaining. I'm very happy. But do they unhook your old kidneys when they give you a new kidney?
As far as I know, they removed the old kidney.
No, they did not. They told me they did not remove it.
Well, then how'd they hook up the other one? They just disconnect it and leave it there?
Well, they
there's
put
an
the other
input
one.
and output. You have to connect the inputs and the outputs.
They put it down in my groin, in my front.
Okay, well, that's a very interesting operation that I can't answer anything about.
Okay, well, anyway, I was going to, you don't, okay. Well, what about when doctors do laser surgery in your eyes?
Yes.
Can that be changed to Psych K?
Rob?
So you say, thanks a lot. So the surgery to correct your vision you're talking about, is that right, sir?
Right, right. I've had, I got diabetes, so therefore they blame all my eye problems on my diabetes, and then they lasered them, and I only have 20/40 vision now.
Mm-hmm.
May I make
what is your question exactly? I'm not sure any of us understand your question.
Okay, through Psych K, can the work that they've done through the medical system be changed and healed?
In other words, can you go back from the laser surgery and have your regular original eye? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, that's right. Can Psych K help with that?
I do have enough experience for the last 26 years to say, yes, there are people that have used Psych K to improve their vision and actually walked away from needing glasses. And so I would say it's certainly worth a try because you can't lose anything except to see if it works for you. I would recommend going to the Psych K website and checking on, there are instructors in Canada and Alberta, as a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure. So I would start there, talk to the Psych K instructor and see what they recommend and if you could set up a private session. That'd be the way to do it.
I think if I don't misunderstand, sorry, what were you saying?
I'd just like to add something about that.
Sure.
The first question, is this diabetes type 2 that you're dealing with?
We temporarily muted the caller, so we'll have to unmute him
well,
again.
basically, is that it's recognized that the diabetes is a consequence of the stress when it's type 2, and you can change the stress, and the cells are capable of regenerating and repairing themselves, but it's also based on your consciousness and your mind. When a person is told that there's nothing they can do, that belief is translated by the mind into the chemistry that will inhibit anything you can do. We have to recognize that the function of the mind is to take the belief and then turn that into the control mechanism that regulates the cells. So when we have been programmed with a belief of limitation, we experience limitation, but it's not necessarily real. It's really how the mind will interpret that. The body has great regenerative capacity, and really what we need is a mind that is encouraged to that regeneration rather than beliefs that stop the regeneration because of a limitation, which is then translated into chemistry by the brain, which is then used to influence the genetics of the cell. So it really becomes important for people to recognize we are very powerful, and we really have to not buy into so much limitation as we have been programmed to experience for years and years. And this is part of the new biology that's so critical of how capable and how powerful we really are when we get out from the limiting beliefs.
Yeah, I just want to mention to people again, a couple of people asked how to spell Rob's website, Psyche. It's like psych, Psych, and a hyphen and K.com. Really simple. So this, just one more question from the webcast that's kind of along the same lines. And I actually, this question that I'm interested in very much myself. What causes these diseases when it seems like the body has lost its ability to fight back, as is Lou Gehrig's disease, in which a healthy person a year ago is in a wheelchair in hospice care? Basically, the listener's asking, how could it be so fast? And then the second part of the question, which I feel is really important for all kinds of people, is there a point of no return? And how do you know you've had a subconscious program of illnesses operating for years before it appears? Actually, this is a bunch of questions in one. The part that I'm most particularly interested in is there a point of no return when there's been physical compromise? And I think that may be what the caller was asking also. Where there's physical compromise, is there a point where you cannot recover from that in your experience or belief systems? And then the other part of the question that I think this listener is asking is, how do you know, how can you be on the alert to know what your subconscious programming is so that you can proactively interrupt a disease process before it manifests as something that may be past a point of return?
Rob, you want to start that one?
Yeah, I'll address the last one first. How do you know what your beliefs are that might be affecting your health or your well-being in life? And I'd say the easiest way, and this sounds like a real simple answer, but it's real true, just take a look at your life. You know, what's going on? What's your body printing out? Because the printout is a direct function of the beliefs that you carry, most of them subconscious, like Bruce has said. So that's one way to know what your beliefs are. If you're starting to manifest physiological symptoms, the sooner that you recognize them as likely driven from epigenetic signals, also known as belief systems, that are informing the body to produce an environment that's user-friendly to the manifestation of that disease, let's say cancer, just because it's a popular one in terms of everybody knows what that is, and the C word sounds a little like a death sentence. Well, clearly it's not, number one. And I would say then nested in that answer is an answer to the other question about is it ever too late for the body to regenerate? I would suggest, yeah. I mean, you can have massive trauma and physiologically probably extremely unlikely. Is it impossible? Nothing's impossible in a theoretical sense. Is it probable? Yes, probability issue is very well is the determinant. You can get so much damage that it's just not going to happen. And the other thing is, let's stop and think about the reality of this. How do people check out of this planet? They often get a disease that's socially acceptable, like cancer, and they exit. When it's their time, it's their time. And depending on your worldview, that can happen very early on in a life or very late in a life. I believe that spiritual component is what it is, and that we come in for particular reasons. When our life lessons are learned in that regard, oftentimes we choose an exit strategy. So if you factor in all of that, there's no black and white, in my opinion, way to know, okay, so I'm supposed to be here or I'm not supposed to be here. I would do everything possible, which is what my approach to it, to prolong life if it's a high quality of life. If it's not, then you have to make a choice about things. So Psyche, yes, you can work, and I've watched what I would call miracle after miracle over the years in terms of people's health changing from what looked like a catastrophic ending to complete remission of the disease, some diseases that are so-called terminal. I think terminal diseases, the diseases that can't be healed, so to speak, are really diseases that can be cured from within rather than from out. They say you can't cure it. It's incurable. I say it's incurable because you're looking at the cure from the outside in, when most cure and most power, Bruce has been saying this for an hour and a half, and so have I in our own ways, is that the power to heal, much of it is the doctor within. So if you can go to that part of you, contact the subconscious mind, give it a new set of programs that are life-enhancing instead of life-threatening, yes, many diseases can be completely reversed if it is in the spiritual contract, so to speak, of your existence on this planet.
Okay, go ahead, Shifra.
And I was just going to say something really short. As Rob was giving that beautiful answer, it came back to my mind the story of Anita Morjani, that she was dead, and her body, there was nothing healthy left about her body. So she was way past the point of no return, and yet she returned from this deep spiritual, revival that Rob is referring to. And that's just what I wanted to say.
That's just one of so many. And the unfortunate part about the so many is that conventional medical community doesn't really encourage or support these kinds of healings because it doesn't conform to anything that they teach or have knowledge about. They therefore try to ignore it or just don't even talk about it, about these people that are all over have these spontaneous healings of things that doctors say are terminal. And there's large numbers of them, but we don't read about it a lot because, as I said, their healing does not come in under anything that the medical community could ascribe a mechanism to or any understanding for. So it's just, most times they just say, well, that was a misdiagnosis or something like that. That's just a way of saying they have no understanding for it. And I also want to add this. It's very important. It's not just personal belief that determines your health. It's the belief of the community in which you live as well. Beliefs are not contained within us. Beliefs are broadcast. I could read your mind. We talk about using EEG to read brain activity, and I put wires on your head, and I read brain activity. There's a new technology called, not electroencephalograph, but magnetoencephalograph, and it reads brain activity. And what's most important when I present this in the lecture is to show people the probe that reads brain activity does not touch the body at all. It's outside the body. And the relevance about that is if you come down to what does it really mean, your thoughts are not contained in your head. They're broadcast into the field. Now, people that are close to each other and in harmony with each other frequently read each other's thoughts before sentences are completed. This is just, an understanding that the thoughts are being broadcast and transmitted. And why this is relevant is this. If you live in a world and a community that collectively agrees that you can't do something, when you try to do something, even if you have this great intention and desire and your mind is really working for it, you could be disempowered by the thoughts of others around you who will not believe in what you're trying to do. I'm not Christian by training, but one story from the Bible that just really emphasizes what I'm talking about, if I paraphrase it, it comes out like this. Jesus could not do miracles in his own hometown. Basically, when he would travel on the road and they say the miracle worker is coming, he was able to perform the miracles. When he went back home into the community that knew him as a child where he grew up, they had no belief in him. That's just the carpenter's kid, Jesus. Well, he couldn't do the miracles. And all of a sudden I say, this is a profound story because basically it says, when people believe in you and support you, the miracles happen. But when they don't believe and support you, then even Jesus couldn't do the miracles anymore. And this is why it's so important to recognize that if you're really trying to change something in your life, but everyone around you does not believe in that or agree that it's possible, their thinking process actually collectively can disempower you. That's why it's so important to find yourself in a community of people who live the way you live, think the way you think, and have beliefs the way you have beliefs, because then collectively they empower you as well. So it's very difficult for some people to overcome some kind of illness or disease, let's say a terminal situation, when everyone and their family and their community around them is programmed with the belief that this is not possible. Those beliefs are not contained in their head. They're in a field And you as an individual can be influenced by the field. That's already been demonstrated. And therefore, you have to recognize if you're trying to do something heroic in the sense of taking back power over your life, it's best to do it in an environment where other people will encourage you and support you in your efforts.
Yeah, really, really important. I have actually heard that there was a study done measuring whose beliefs had more influence over the results of an illness, whether it was the patient or the doctor or practitioner, and the answer was the practitioner. Which, do you have any take on that? How would you explain that?
Oh, it's simple, because I say go back to remember the programming that runs 95% of our life. Much of that foundational programming occurred in the first 7 years. And these are the programs that are expressed in your life. And I say, okay, let's go back to your childhood. And for most families, I say, well, what happened when somebody was sick in the family? And the answer was, when somebody is sick, they have to go to the doctor. Mommy's sick, she has to go to the doctor. You're sick, you have to go to the doctor. And I'm saying, why is this relevant? Well, if you're an infant and you're growing up in this family, when it comes to health issues, what is the program you are downloaded with? And the answer is, when it comes to health issues, you are not the one. You have to go to the doctor. And there's a joke side to this, Shifra, and that is this. Nobody ever said the doctor had to do anything. All you had to do was go to the doctor. And why is that relevant? Because ask the people, how many of them on the way to the doctor or in the doctor's waiting room all of a sudden start to get well again? They start to feel not as sick as they were. And the answer was simple. We are capable of healing ourselves. That is a given reality. That's always been there. People were capable of healing themselves for a million years before medical schools were created. And why this is relevant is we're capable of healing ourselves, but what does the programming say? Oh, before you heal yourself, you have to go to the doctor. So now we put an impediment in our programming that says, I'm capable of healing myself, but not until I go to the doctor. That's where the joke part is, because no one said the doctor had to do anything, he just had to go. So that's why when you make the motivation and you start to move going to the doctor or in the doctor's office, you cleared that limitation, and guess what? Now the body is free to do its self-healing. You've accomplished the first, important step on the list. Go to the doctor. But this is why it's also important, because we were programmed when it comes to truth about our health. Who are we? We're just the average people. The professional has the truth, and we don't. That is the programming in infancy. Significance is then if a doctor says you're going to die in 3 months, your program takes that as truth, puts it into the brain mechanism, and starts a clock that starts counting down for 3 months. And so people die pretty close to the estimate by the doctor. And you say, well, how come the doctor was so accurate? And the answer was mainly because the statement by the doctor is taken as truth by the patient, and the mind and the subconscious mind that's doing this, not the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, will engage that truth and manifest it. And all of a sudden you realize you give up control over your health because the programming says you are not in charge of that. The professional is. And then all of a sudden the professional's opinion becomes your truth, and then your mind will make that opinion into reality.
That's really crazy, and I guess the same thing applies when the experts are telling you that the economy is really bad, and
yes.
And everything else that we're hearing.
But that's when we give up power, because that was that programming the first 7 years. How does the system work? And then you find out, well, you're just an average person, and this person's a professional. And by that understanding, we are giving up power over that element or truth or story to the professional, and then we buy their truth, put that into the system, and then the system will then create a behavior that will complement that.
What a picture. Wow. Okay, so I've kept you both almost 2 hours, and I'm so thankful and appreciative of your time. And I want to I want to push it just a drop farther and just ask you for some, just conclude with your thoughts on what people can do to move out of this system in general. Obviously, Psyche is a very powerful tool and one that I strongly encourage people to use. Bruce and Rob, as I said in the beginning, have been working together for 14 years and have seen and produced miracles together and separately again and again and again and again, or probably better said, created the environment that and the support that allowed people to create miracles from themselves, which I think is one big takeaway from here, where you're saying that you presented the picture so clearly that we really are in charge in so many ways. And even when it comes to, I'll go to this healer or that healer, even if we withdraw from the mainstream medical system, it's still, we still can be caught in that feeling that we have to find the right modality and the right help and the right, and perhaps it's just that inner decision and belief that we can and will be healthy, and then things will come our way. So anyway, enough of that. So I just want to ask you if you can just conclude with whatever it is that you would like to offer us, that we can leave with, and also how in a general sense we as individuals, everyone listening and everyone who's going to listen to the replay, how we can step out of this call and really create for ourselves a new reality where we ramp up our beliefs, behavior, empowerment, everything as imaginal cells, and really start to pull this world and our lives in a completely new direction.
Okay, I guess I'll do the basic part because that's the biology, and then leave the psychology part to my partner, Rob. Basically, the new biology is an empowering biology because it really dismantles the limitations of beliefs that the old story of our being victims has created. As long as we believe we're victims, then we will manifest all that victimization that we've been programmed with. That it's really interesting. A recent study from an epigeneticist at UCLA University here in California. He's a professor of medicine. His conclusion on studying the nature of the genetic readout of people really went back to the original programming and came up with this really important insight. And I love it because his conclusion is exactly what I've been talking about for 30 years. And his conclusion about life is this: our subjective perceptions have more power than our objective reality. When I read that, I said, wow, after all these years, finally, this is the statement coming from modern leading-edge medicine. Our subjective perceptions, our beliefs, are more powerful than our objective reality, the reality that we're experiencing. Once we begin to own this, once we understand the nature of the power of the beliefs from a medical and from a quantum physical understanding, we have to let go of a belief of being frail and vulnerable biological organisms open to all kinds of insults and infections and things like that, to recognize we are so powerful, and yet we have no belief to support that power. I mentioned the fact that you can walk across hot coals and not get burned as long as your consciousness is maintained. You can't walk across the coals and for a moment have doubt. The moment you have doubt that you can do this is instantly the moment you get burned. And so basically it's really reflecting the power of consciousness. I use in the lectures, I show people articles about women who lift up cars when a child is trapped underneath it. There are articles from all over the world about how an unathletic woman, a mother, whose child under a car, could lift up this car. And then I show them pictures of these weightlifters trying to do the same things, muscles bulging and sweating, and it goes like, wow, how did the woman do it? And the answer was because there was nothing in her mind that says she couldn't do it. The belief that she couldn't help her child, that wasn't in her mind. If she had to lift up the car, she lifted up the car. And lastly, another one that I show in the lecture, and again, how powerful we are, is that here in the United States we have religious fundamentalists in the South that are kind of weird kind of people. There's not the kind of people I hang around with, but they do something called testify. And testify is their belief in God is so strong that they do something that no normal human being would ever imagine doing to prove that God protects them. Some of them are called snake handlers, and they handle these very poisonous snakes, and even when they get bitten, there's no consequence. But the one I want to leave you with is some of them drink strychnine poison to demonstrate that God protects them. And the fact is, they drink the poison and have no harmful consequences. And all of a sudden you start to realize, oh my God, people walk across fire, people lift up cars, people can drink poison. And all of these things are totally influenced by their belief system. We are so powerful, and over the years have programmed to see ourselves as frail and vulnerable. This is the time of change, because we can all express these powerful human characteristics once we change the programming. And that's when I love to turn it over to my hero programming, to Rob.
Boy, you're a hard act to follow, Lipton. I got news for you.
You're both hard acts to follow.
Well, I would say in terms of the core thing is we do need to recapture mastery of our own lives and not accept the programs of our societies and cultures that aren't doing us any good and aren't doing even the cultures any good. So I would say, from my point of view, I would say the most dangerous plague in the world is the plague of powerlessness that Bruce has been talking about. So if you need to doubt something in your life, doubt your limits.
Wow.
That was cool.
That was really cool. That space that you left, I fell right into it, and then wow. Okay. Thank you so much again. I want to just add one thing. A listener wrote in and asked me to add her experience that her daughter is scheduled for her second psych session today, and with one of your practitioners in Santa Cruz, and she's been suffering from debilitating eating disorder for years, is 20 now, and this listener is asking for people to be encouraged and understand that this work of undoing false beliefs, debilitating beliefs, can be very effective also for mental health issues and for addictions. So I just wanted to add that. There's just so much available in what you've both said and so much available in what you're offering. So I just really want to put my own energy behind encouraging people to make use of it. It's here, and we could all use it, and the world could use us once we're free to be ourselves, which seems to be quite a short process once we decide that we aren't going to believe in our limits. So thank you very much, Rob. Thank you very much, Bruce. You guys are amazing, and it's been just joyful and wonderful, and I so appreciate your being here, and thank you on behalf of all my listeners as well.
Thank you, for doing the beautiful thing you're doing, for allowing space on this planet for people to hear what they need to be able to hear to change their lives. Thank you so much for the important work you're doing.
And I also want to thank the audience, because you are the people that make a difference. You are the cultural creatives. By just listening to this program, you're looking outside the conventional box for answers, and that's where they're going to be found, because the box answers have created the problems. So the resolutions are outside. And thank you, Schiffer, for providing a platform for new thought to enter the world.
My joy, my privilege, my mission, and it's just wonderful. We could keep going around. But I'll say thank you the last time on behalf of me and all the listeners, and really want to bless you in great, great success in expanding your work and the number of people that are able to benefit from it. And hopefully we'll all be celebrating soon as this whole thing turns around.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye, everybody.